on here.
Okay, the time is 3:09. We're now back on the record. This is just 3.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rastrelli, getting back to your summary and opinions. Your first one again was that the officers were informed and or had prior knowledge of JMR's disappearance. Am I correct that you can't identify which officers you believe may have had prior knowledge of JMR's disappearance?
That's correct.
Okay. And so to finish off summary number 1, that also goes to, without saying then that you have no idea which officers, if any, were directly involved in JMR's disappearance or were attempting to conceal their involvement.
That's correct.
Okay.
You're good.
No, I'm good.
What portion of this investigation was conducted by Grosse Pointe Woods or the Grosse Pointe Woods defendants?
What part?
What part of your review do you recall when they?
Well, going back through the reports, it seems like they did a follow-up investigation, following up after the farms,
Okay.
trying to determine what frame of mind Miss Romain was in, what kind of financial difficulties there might have been. Phone, if I'm not mistaken, they did some phone, looking at phone records and things
Okay.
of that nature, trying to determine what could have happened to her, which was pretty typical, that part of the investigation, the follow-up.
So it's pretty typical stuff. So
I would say that would be pretty typical. You're going to ask questions, you're going to, look around for witnesses or anybody else that might be able to determine what happened to her, because at this point she just disappeared.
Right, so
we don't know what happened to her.
we don't know if she's alive or dead, correct?
No, at that point, no one knows. I don't know, they don't know, no one knows.
Okay.
Everybody's still looking.
So if at that point we don't know whether she's alive or dead, how do you square that with your conclusion number 9, that she was rendered unconscious and then placed in the water at or near where her body was recovered?
My conclusion to that was pretty simple, based on what I observed in the autopsy photographs, based on the fact that she was in the water. We'll say she was in the water the whole time, the 2.5 months, whatever it was, almost 3 months. She's in the water that long. A typical drowning victim sinks, and when it's cold like it is here, fresh water, they will stay submerged until the water warms up enough, typically 50 or more, before they'll float back up to the surface. So they could be submerged for a long period of time. If she's submerged and on the bottom, she's going to be dragging along the bottom. If she's drifted 31 miles, there'd be tattered clothing. There would be a lot more marine life damage to the body than I observed. I've seen bodies in the water for a week that their hands are almost gone, and their faces are gone. And in this photograph, she doesn't have that kind of marine life damage to her. So it didn't appear to be that she was submerged and tumbling along the bottom that long. So that was one of my opinions, was it's possible that maybe she was put in the water at a later time, already deceased, and then she came up by Bobolo Island. Like I had mentioned before, when you look at the nautical charts, there's so many islands that she missed. If she had gone in right there at the mouth of the St. Clair to the Detroit, based on that, just the physical evidence of that.
So you think it would be more probable that she would have got hung up on one of those other smaller islands?
I would think so, because that's the kind of stuff we would see. If there was a body of water that went into another body of water, most of the time they would get caught on an obstruction.
But not all of the time.
Most of the time, maybe more often than not. So yeah, but it's possible to miss something. But
so more often than not, what is that, 51%? Is that 75%?
More like 75%.
So there's a 25% chance that it could have happened the way that it appeared in the report.
Objection form.
Not scientific, because I can't come up with enough numbers to give you an actual percentage. But
Well, but it's your opinion that she didn't follow through, that she didn't go from the mouth of the St. Clair and the Detroit and miss all of those islands and end up near Boblo Island. That's your opinion, correct?
Yes, because like
Is that a scientific opinion?
well, it's based on, it is scientific in the sense that most drowning victims that do wind up on the bottom and they do bump along the bottom have injuries on their forehead, the backs of their hands, other parts of their body, or their clothing would be tattered from dragging along. And from what the bottom composition out here is, it's rocky and it's got all kinds of, stuff on the bottom from fishing and freighters and stuff. It's just it's improbable that she could have missed everything and not have those kind of injuries.
Okay, so in
30 miles is a long way.
You were in Martin County, Florida,
Yeah.
Is that where you do you have a similar lake and river setup in Martin County?
We have a lot of water there. We have the
sure.
ocean, we have rivers, we have canals and lakes.
Sure.
Some have rocks, some don't. There's a lot of debris, and bodies when we recover them will have marine life, injuries to them, post-mortem. They'll have some kind of scrape marks on them where they've scraped along the bottom because there's oyster beds and there's a lot of different things that play out.
Are there oyster beds here?
No, not that I'm aware
So,
of. But you do have
what-
rocky bottoms and debris.
What training specifically do you have in cold water, freshwater recovery?
Well, we have fresh water in Florida. So I mean, we do have water gets cold. Doesn't get 30 degrees, but it gets cold.
I can fish. It doesn't mean I'm a fisherman. What training do you have specific to cold water recovery of bodies?
There's really nothing specific unless you're diving in an ice hole. I mean, recovering a body from underwater is the same whether it's warm or cold. Visibility factors play in, like I mentioned earlier. Salt water opposed to fresh water plays a factor, currents and tides.
But I mean, I don't mean to quibble with you, Mr. Rastrelli, but you're saying that warm water recovery is the same as cold water recovery. But earlier you testified that in this particular cold water, the degree of temperature that this water was in, she would only last, I think you had said 20 to 30 minutes.
That's based on charts.
Okay, but that's not this. So that differs from fresh water, warm water recovery, doesn't it? Because a body, in your opinion, would stay alive longer. Correct?
Objection form.
What would stay alive longer? The warm water?
A person in warm water.
A warm water victim wouldn't suffer hypothermia as quickly as someone in the cold water. I've had training in that. It's a significant amount of training in that.
Okay.
But a cold water recovery person, sometimes if you recover them within an hour, may be resuscitated and may survive. In the warm water, they won't. Typically, if they've been submerged 20, 30 minutes down there, you're not bringing them back. They're done. And that's based on doctors, and the training that we receive, why so many cases like this are recoveries and not rescues.
Have you yourself ever participated in a cold water search and rescue?
Not in this cold water, no.
How cold?
50, but not 30.
And that was down in Florida?
No, it was in Florida. It was the northern part of Florida, up in those caverns.
Have you ever had to, have you ever performed a search and rescue or search and recovery in icy water that had ice in it?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
And so number 8 in your conclusion says the JMR did not lay submerged on the bottom of Lake St. Clair since January 12, 2010, then traverse the approximately 3 miles along the bottom of the lake until entering the Detroit River. As we just said, you think it's more likely than not that she didn't, that's correct?
Yes.
But you're not certain?
No, I'm not. I'm basing it again on the photographs of her body.
If you had to put a percentage certain, your assuredness of this, what's your percentage?
What's the percentage that she
Yeah.
didn't? She would have evidence that she was on that rocky bottom. I mean, she would have damage to her.
I understand that's your belief. What I want to know is, how sure are you? Is it 50%?
I would say more than 50%. I just don't see how it could happen. She has no substantial injuries post-mortem that would show she was on that rocky bottom. And it's very rocky out there.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that if I hadn't walked it myself and seen it.
But I thought a moment ago you said it was more likely than not that your conclusion was correct. So I just want to know, is it 50%?
Oh, we're going back to
75?
percentages again.
Sure.
I'm about 90% sure that she didn't go in that water there and traverse along the bottom because she has no injuries to her body or any real serious damage to her clothing or shoes that would indicate that she was drug along that bottom tidal flow or current, whatever you want to call it, that would have moved her body along 30 miles. She came out of that water,
Okay.
very, very little damage to her body. I mean, even the post-mortem remarks of the medical examiner, a little injury to her leg here and another injury somewhere else where she apparently got cut on something on the bottom of her leg.
She got cut where?
On her leg. It was a cut on her leg. It was in the report we saw. We were looking at it when we were looking at the chart before.
That's okay. I don't need to look. If we go to conclusion number 10, number
Which
10,
one?
number 10, you said the police conduct was either an example of gross incompetence or intentional dereliction of duties. Do you see that? It's on page 12, number 10?
No, number 10. You skipped the number 10.
Yes.
Page 2, right?
Yes, page 12.
Page 12.
Huh?
Page 12.
Oh, you're on page 12.
You
keep bouncing me around here.
No, I'm staying on page 12. I'm staying on page 12.
Oh, you went to page 12 to begin with. I remember you asking me if they were all the same.
Yes.
No, page 12.
All right, so you say the police conduct was either an example of gross incompetence or intentional dereliction of duties.
Yeah, I said mentioned that before.
Which police, first, let's start with agency. Which agency?
You have, again, I'm going back to this crime scene photograph. So that would be Grosse Pointe Farm.
Okay, so in number 10, when you refer to the police conduct, you're referring to Grosse Pointe Farms.
I'm referring to these photographs. So these are taken by Grosse Pointe Farm.
Okay, so I just want to know who you mean by police.
That's
By
who I
police.
mean.
Okay, Grosse Pointe Farm. All right. And can you specify which officers? I mean, you've got the reports that they all wrote.
I go back to when we're talking about the way the crime scene was investigated. You have who was in charge of it. I don't know. Who took
Okay.
the photographs. I don't know. If you want to give me a name.
No, I want you to give me a name.
I don't know who took these photographs. It doesn't say.
Okay.
It
So,
doesn't say.
so I'm correct. You can't identify which officers you believe were derelict in their duty or grossly negligent or grossly incompetent.
Objection form.
No, I can't. I can
thank
only
you.
say based on these photographs that there were a lot of things that weren't done that should have been done. Because we're right back to footwear.
And you believe it was a cover-up because you think things at the crime scene should have been done better, differently, whatever adjective you want to use.
It should have been done correctly.
Okay. And so in your opinion, it was not done correctly.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't done correctly, you leap to the conclusion that it must have been a cover-up.
That would be the only other conclusion unless they're that incompetent.
Have you talked with Mr. Robinette, who's a diver, correct?
Yes.
Do you know anything about his experience and training? I don't know where he was before.
He told me I believe he told me he was a Michigan State police diver
Okay.
and police officer at one point.
Did you speak to anybody at the Coast Guard?
Excuse me?
At the Coast Guard, anyone?
No, not from the agency here, no, sir. No.
Do you have any idea how frequently or with what frequency the various Grosse Pointe police agencies utilize the Coast Guards for searches?
No, I don't know how often they use them. But being in Florida, how often we use them, and we have our own boat unit, and we have our own dive team and everything else there.
So you don't need to call the Coast Guard in your
Well,
situation?
we do most of it ourselves, but if we need the Coast Guard, we will call them, because we have right out of 18 miles away, we have a station, a Coast Guard station, and we worked with them a lot when I was with the agency.
So if this situation had happened in Florida, obviously we wouldn't have snow and everything else, but you would have utilized your own department's dive team.
Resources,
Okay. What if you didn't have those resources?
then we would have called the Coast Guard.
Kind of like they did in this case?
Yeah, I'm not saying that they shouldn't call the Coast Guard. I'm just saying that it seems like they jumped the gun to call the Coast Guard. We don't know if she ever went in the water at that point.
We don't know that she didn't, though.
We don't know anything because the crime scene wasn't done in such a
So
fashion
your
that
opinion
would
is
tell
we
me
should have
that.
just erred on the side of let's not do anything and possibly save this person. Is that correct?
That's not what I said.
Okay, so
What I said was to do a preliminary investigation first to ascertain she went in the water, and that would have been bring a dog out and not tell the victim's family that a dog won't work in the cold. And again,
and you have you're basing that statement that somebody told her that the dog wouldn't work in the cold on what? On what
it was
Mrs.
too cold out.
Who told you that?
Miss Romain.
Okay, and you did nothing to corroborate whether that
It
statement was
wasn't in
actually made?
writing anywhere. I wasn't going to interview every police officer to see if that would happen that night. It wasn't in the police report.
Did you talk to any police officer?
No, I did not.
Did you, and as we discussed, you didn't even bother reviewing any of these officers' testimony, correct?
No, I did not.
Thank you. Earlier, you mentioned that in preparation for this deposition, you reviewed your report, correct?
Yes, I reviewed my report and I looked over the PowerPoint.
During Mr. DeGrude's questioning of you, you identified some errors in your report, correct?
Yes.
Did you find any other errors?
No, like I had mentioned last night, when I got here I was exhausted, so I kind of read it, but I didn't proofread it. I read it, and of course we've come across a few errors here and there, but nothing that really renders my opinion as far as the way the crime scene was documented and processed. It stands. I can't change that. It is what it is. I mean, this is what we have, and it's not good enough.
But the question was, did you find any errors in your report? And the answer is no?
We found them today.
Okay, but there were no other errors that you found?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Okay.
Earlier you testified that that you found it difficult to walk along the shore where Ms. Romain may have gone in the water. Is that correct?
That's
I'm sorry. Was it,
I found it to be difficult, yes,
Okay.
to walk on those rocks.
and I know we've got a videographer here, but you're in reasonably good shape, correct? Okay. And you were wearing the appropriate type of shoes for that type of walking?
Yes, I was
And you-
wearing rubber wetsuit boots with rubber soles, which, were like a boot sole.
Okay. But you, and so based on that, you believe it would have been very difficult for Ms. Romain to walk down there, correct?
Oh, with high heels, yes.
I'm having a little trouble understanding. If it was so hard to walk down there, you also testified there were a lot of footprints down there in the snow, correct?
What was that? I didn't.
There was also a lot of footprints in the snow, correct?
Well, there was some sort of.
You can answer.
There was some sort of footwear, but again, I can't ascertain what it was.
Well, I don't mean just hers. I mean, there were officers who walked down there, correct?
Who?
Officers who investigated the scene.
Well, they walked down to that, to some degree, how far they walked and where they went. The only photos I have are a few of the pictures I've seen with the divers, in and around the water's edge.
When you saw the photos of the footprints that were alleged to be, or
Somebody walked down there, yes.
okay, so were there any other footprints around Ms. Romain's?
There was, if I remember correctly, in one of the photographs where the person had sat, there appeared to be two different type of footprint.
Okay, so we know that at
Somebody
least
walked there.
that somebody walked down.
Yeah.
We also know that, as you just said, there was somebody who sat on the wall, right?
That someone
Sat on the
sat
wall?
on that break wall, yes.
Okay.
I think the first level down.
So
Yeah.
it couldn't have been that difficult to walk down.
I'm not saying it's impossible.
Okay.
I just said it would be difficult in a pair of high heels. And given her physical condition.
Did you ask for any, other than when counsel provided you with the materials you reviewed, did you ask for any additional materials? Did you ask for any phone records? Or anything at all to corroborate the
No, sir.
timeline or anything else?
No, sir. Again, I relied mostly on the police reports and the photographs because once a police officer memorializes something in writing, that's what I'm dealing with. Obviously you as attorneys, you get into in-depth questions for court proceedings. for me to read all the depositions and look at all these other records really wasn't what I was asked to do. I was asked to just look at the crime scene and look at the dive recovery situation to see what was not done properly. Everything else that I read, there's conflicts with what was done opposed to what
you believe should have been done?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's basically what I was asked, and that's what I did.
Okay, on page 4 of your report, you write that the report also reflects that the police informed them that Michelle stated she had been looking for JMR since 5 p.m., which is untrue since Michelle had been in court with her sister, brother. Oh, sorry. Her sister, brother, father, and JMR all day. The U.S. Coast Guard report.
Where are you reading that?
I'm reading the bottom of 4, going on to the top of 5.
4.
And the U.S. Coast Guard report also states that the police told them there were shoe prints leaving the car heading into the water, which is untrue. Okay. You relied on this timeline that Michelle Romain provided you, right?
Yes, that's
Okay. And what time did Michelle and Joann separate on that day, according to Michelle?
I believe it was right after court, after 5 when court was over. And then
Okay.
they went to dinner, if I'm not mistaken.
Who went to dinner?
Michelle, her father, and her sister. And that her mother and brother left in the Lexus.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out why it's untrue that they, well, strike that. On page 11 of your report, at the top there is some,
I'm sorry, what page were we on?
11? At the top there's a section with some bullet pointed bold bold statements there. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Listen, I didn't hear what you said.
Page 11,
Page
you said
11.
at the top where it's bolded and there's bullet points?
Right.
Okay, so you mentioned Paul Hawk in 3 of those statements. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, are you relying on Paul Hawk or not?
What's that
Are
happening?
you relying on Paul Hawk's statement or not?
Am I lying on it?
Are you relying?
Relying on it? No, I just, again, this is what he said. I had him come to
Right.
that so I could say, okay, you could see what you said you saw. I don't know what he did see. I could
So
it's
why-
possible to see it.
Why does it matter? So if you're not including it in your report or in your opinion,
No.
okay,
I just,
so why would it be unorthodox for either Grosse Pointe Farms or Grosse Pointe Woods to not include Mr. Hawk, to not follow up as alleged in this case that should have been?
I didn't see where they followed up on him and questioned him at all.
Okay, neither did you.
Well, I just wanted to see what he could see, so I asked him to recreate the best he could what he saw, explain it to me. And I could sit back and I could see from the vantage point that, yes, you could see what he said he saw. I don't know what he saw, what he claims he saw. I can't say he saw it or not. But visibly possible for him to see it. That's what it boiled down to. So if it was true...
Do you believe it was true?
If it was true, I was going to get to.
Okay.
If it was true, what he said, then obviously that's a serious lead to follow up on. But I wasn't there in 2010 to follow up on any of this. I'm 5 years later and was not asked to investigate that part.
But if that was true, don't you agree that that would invalidate your conclusion that she was rendered unconscious and put in the water somewhere else?
Like I had mentioned before, I was kind of insistent with him, could you be certain that it was a woman? Because in my mind, could it have been a man dressed like a woman? Could it have been a man and he misinterpreted what he saw? But he saw what he saw.
Can I ask you one more time?
Yes, sir.
If Paul Hawk is correct, am I correct, that it invalidates your conclusion that she did not enter the water or that she was not down at the water's edge on that day?
Objection form.
No, because if it wasn't Joann, then it doesn't invalidate my conclusion. If it was someone else,
Okay, so in your
I
discussion
don't
with
know.
Mr. Hawk, he did not identify her as Joann Matouk Romain. Is that correct?
he basically said that he saw what looked like a woman dressed in black. But he, as far as I didn't have a picture of her to say, was this who you saw? So in my opinion was, can you say this was Joann?
Did you get a sworn statement from Mr. Hawk?
What's that?
Did you receive a sworn statement from Mr. Hawk?
No, I didn't receive a sworn statement. I don't know why I wrote that up there, sworn statement.
So that's another error in your report?
Yeah, because it was when I was typing, I guess, because that's what I used to do, would get sworn statements, swear somebody in, but I couldn't swear anybody in, so when I wrote it, I just...
You've been involved, how many lawsuits, how many criminal or civil proceedings have you been involved in your entire career?
I don't know, a lot,
100?
more than that.
400?
Yeah, I would say that.
It's a pretty big difference between a statement and a sworn statement, isn't it?
Right. Oh, there is. I didn't swear him in, so that is wrong. I should have just said statement. I don't know why I wrote sworn, I just wrote sworn.
Do you have a statement from Mr. Hall?
No, because I didn't swear him in.
Do you
And
have
I
any
don't have a statement.
Do you have an unsworn statement from him?
Well, I have just basically what he said.
Where is that?
I wrote it here. He didn't write it down, I asked him. So he stated to me.
So you consider him a witness even though he wouldn't sign his name to it?
No, I didn't consider him a witness, I just said that he saw this. So in my opinion, if this is what he saw, that should have been investigated. I didn't make
I'm sorry.
any...
Can I ask you a question? What's
Yeah.
your definition of a witness?
Someone that's going to walk in the courtroom, put their hand up and swear to the testimony they're going to see, like I am. That's a witness.
That's the only thing that's a witness?
If the person's not going to walk in a courtroom, what good are they? In any case. I mean, I can't get a search warrant from, or anything on someone that's not willing to swear to the statement they're making.
I'm having a lot of trouble with this. So you're telling me, let's say you have a criminal informant.
They're called a confidential informant.
Okay, they're a confidential informant.
They're not a witness.
Okay. So you're not going to follow up on something
I'll
they said?
follow it up, but I can't use that person.
You can use it in your investigation, can't you?
Yeah, but I can't use him or her.
Do you put it in your report that the CI told you this?
That's what it would say, CI.
But there's
That's not a witness. A witness is someone that observes a crime and is going to testify to it.
But, okay, so earlier you said that there were errors in some of the reports because they just took somebody's statement. Isn't that what you're doing with the criminal informant? You're just memorializing what somebody told you?
Well, he's not a criminal informant.
So what?
He just told me something, and I said, this is interesting, so I put it in there.
Okay. Have you ever seen an affidavit from Paul Hawk?
Have I ever seen an affidavit? No, I have no affidavit of Paul Hawk.
Okay, so what, you're after those bulleted points, you include Grosse Pointe Woods in the next sentence. Grosse Pointe Farms and Grosse Pointe Woods Police Department, accusing them of unusual and unorthodox methods of investigation. We've discussed your criticism of Grosse Pointe Farms' processing of the scene, an initial investigation.
Right.
What was unusual and unorthodox about Grosse Pointe Woods?
Again, both of these agencies are involved in the investigation of this woman. You got other witnesses that have come forward, and it seems like in none of the police reports did they reflect that they followed up on these people.
What other witnesses? Because
Hawk, the guy from the gas station.
so do you have any records of them talking to Paul
No,
Hawk?
that's what I said. They're not here. So I don't have
You've
them,
never
so-
seen the records of the police department talking to Paul Hawk?
No, they're not here.
So okay. So if those records exist
Okay.
and you weren't provided them, that's something that would be important for your report, wouldn't it?
Follow up on the investigation, yes.
Okay.
That would be important for
Okay.
them.
What about other individuals? So when you just said following up with other witnesses. So
They
are you-
would, yeah.
Okay. Your earlier definition of a witness is somebody who is willing to put their hand up and swear in court.
Well, you said they had a sworn statement of it. They have.
I'm talking about Paul Hawk. I'm talking about, you said witnesses, plural.
We can follow up on them and see what they're going to tell you. Yeah.
Who? People,
Whoever they had interviewed that can identify what happened to Joann, where she went, what she did, would be considered witnesses.
and are you saying now it is your testimony that as a law enforcement professional for 25 years, or however long you were, that the only statements of value from individuals are those who are willing to sign it under oath?
What I said, if they're not going to walk into a courtroom and testify, and all they're going to give you is some information you're going to find, if you can't verify it, then what are they? Are they a witness now? Witness to what?
Okay, so before you verify it, do you make a note of do you memorialize or note?
We
what you
make a
put
note
So-
and then try to follow up on what it is they told you.
So if somebody calls in a tip and says, hey, I saw Joann the day after this incident. She's not in the water. I saw her.
Right?
Do you say, hey, I'm not going to note this. I'm not going to put this in a
No.
report unless you're willing to put your name on it?
And that's not what I said.
Okay.
But it's verifiable information. If he
Thank
said
you.
he saw her, then show me where she is.
I'm
How
not
do I
talking about
find
Paul Hawk anymore. I'm talking
No,
about
I'm
witnesses in
anybody.
general.
Anybody. You just said Joann, so whoever that person was.
Well, yeah. I mean, are you aware that there were tips that were called in? Are you aware of any of that?
There were probably a lot of tips called in.
Do you
about
have any of
something
those
like-
reports?
No, because what I have is right here. And what I was asked to do was review the crime scene stuff
Well, but
and the dive recovery stuff, not reinvestigate the whole case.
Well, but okay.
I mean,
Let's take it a
because-
different way. You tell me what your opinion of Grosse Pointe Woods specifically, any of the defendants or anyone from Grosse Pointe Woods Police Department, what is your opinion? What is your conclusion?
My conclusion, like I said before, was you either have gross incompetence or you have dereliction of duty. There just seems to be so many holes in this investigation that weren't done.
I got to stop you.
And not
Wait, let him
all right,
finish.
go on.
Let
That's
him
all I'm
finish.
saying. You asked me my opinion was. There was a lot of things that should have been done that weren't done, and now it leaves us all questioning to this day, where did she go in the water? How did she get in the water?
What should Grosse Pointe Woods have done?
They were assigned the case from the other agency, and they should have took it over and retraced the steps of the other agency and then added to it.
So you think they should have gone back to the scene
Essentially.
after the car's already been dusted and taken? And
What are you gonna
they
do?
shouldn't rely on their neighboring agency. So in your example, when a homicide occurs in one county, but the body's recovered in another county, both agencies should double check each other's work and are not entitled to rely on the work done by the cooperating agency?
I believe that because I've seen agencies miss things from interagency reports to others. They miss stuff. And like you have to have, 90% of the time in any kind of big case or a case like this, you're going to have someone that's overseeing what's going on. It doesn't seem like anybody was either overseeing what was being done or didn't care what was being done, is what it looks like.
And you base that specifically with Grosse Pointe Woods on what? In your report, you mentioned Grosse Pointe Woods a grand total of 9 times. One of those is to say, or 2 of those are to say, 1, that you reviewed their reports, and 2, that they received or the case was transferred to them. So there's 7 mentions of Grosse Pointe Woods in this report, none of which occur in any of the headings. Is that correct?
That occur where?
In any of the headings where you talk about, for example, GPFPD has not collected evidence due to being inept or corrupt. That's one of your headings.
GPFD.
Yeah. Show me where you mention anything that Grosse Pointe Woods did improperly. Show me something.
They were the follow-up agency. So what I was looking at when I reviewed the reports is it just seems like everything that was done, all it does is support a suicide, but no investigation was done to prove anything happened other than a suicide, which I don't believe it is. And there's really no professional reports from anybody that says it's a suicide, that she was suicidal, even the family. But yet there was no investigation done anywhere where it was leading towards, if you go back to Hawk again, who did Hawk identify as maybe a suspect? He said he saw a car that looked like it was a police car there, an unmarked police car. Well, did anybody look into that? I didn't see it in any police reports where there was any follow-up on maybe someone that was posing as a police officer, for crying out loud, out driving around in a Crown Victoria, pulling people over. We have it happen in Florida a lot, and they get mugged, robbed, or whatever, and they think they're getting pulled over by a cop. The car's in the street.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like to me. So why wasn't all this stuff followed up? I don't know. I can't answer that. It's not in the report. I can only go by what I was provided, and these reports don't reflect that occurred. So that's why.
So Paul Hawk is one person. So you think
he's one person.
Well, I gotta know. I gotta know, because if I'm going to defend this, if I'm going to have an expert to counter your opinions, I got to know what you think Grosse Pointe Woods did wrong.
He said right here. It appeared to be an unmarked police car behind it. Okay. So nowhere in any reports, Grosse Pointe Woods or the farms, do they talk about investigating any suspicious unmarked looking police cars. There's no reports of that. Not even a mention that they followed up on it.
And do you know who Paul Hawk told? Who he spoke to?
He said he told the police and that they ran him off.
Which police?
I don't recall which ones he said.
Were you aware that Paul Hawk went to the FBI because he had a splotch of tar on his side view mirror, and he believed it looked like the shape of a hawk, and he thought that was the police sending him a message to keep quiet?
I was not aware of that one. But again, I'm not listing Mr. Hawk as a...
Okay, so you use Mr. Hawk as an example.
I'm trying to say, these are the avenues that we walk down. You get the phone call tip like you mentioned, okay? I used to get phone calls all the time. I'm sure they do too, on all sorts of cases. Well, you have to follow up on them. You have to document what you did with them. But when you don't see any kind of documentation, what did they do with the tip?
So do you know of any of the tips that they received?
I don't know. But I know of these couple, Mr. Hawk and the gas station guy.
If they have, I don't know how many, but if we have records of tips coming in to the various agencies and discussions or records reflecting tips from different people, would that change your opinion on this type of what Grosse Pointe Woods did?
I can only change my opinion based on what I had presented to me. I told you, I wasn't reviewing and changing my report. This is what I have. This is what I based on.
I understand that.
This man, whether he's credible or not, there showed no sign that in here that they tried to verify what he claimed.
Okay.
So if
I understand.
he did see what he saw, it seems to me that they should have followed up on it.
And my question to you, sir, is would your opinion of whether Grosse Pointe Woods Police Department was derelict in their duty, or however you phrase it, for not following up on Paul Hawk or any other tips, would that change if there were records of those tips?
Now, the tips are the follow-ups.
Police report saying that they spoke with so-and-so and they, yeah.
There have to be follow-ups, to discount those tips or approve of them.
Were you provided any information at all about the tips that came in to any of these police agencies?
No.
So am I correct that you really can't opine on whether or not failing to follow up on tips could be constituted as a dereliction of duty because you don't have the information on whether that happened or not?
I can only opine on these police reports that were written, and they reflect no follow-ups other than the ones I saw here.
And you don't have police reports reflecting the tips that came in, correct?
Well, that should have been provided if there was.
Yes, you're right, it should have been. Have you,
Wait, hold on.
oh, she's changing tapes.
Stop that. That's not fair. He's yawning and sleeping on me over there.
You want the rest of my coffee? Are we back on? Okay. In your, I'm sorry, was it 25 years that you were on the job?
Yes.
You ever received a tip from a psychic?
From a psychic? I've talked to a few psychics, but I'm a Christian man and I don't believe in the spiritual voodoo I don't know. There are some people that follow up on those kind of tips. I don't.
So I'm sorry. So you,
I don't believe in psychics. I've gotten people that have called and said, I'm a psychic and I believe this is what happened.
do you follow that lead? Do you at least go and eliminate?
I ask them specific questions. Did you see it happen? Or did you pull this out of the sky like a psychic does? And if they tell me they didn't witness it, it was a dream or it was something, no, I'm not going to follow up on that.
So because of your religious convictions, you choose to not investigate or follow up tips because
No.
you don't believe they're credible.
Objection form.
I asked the question, what did you see and how did you see it and can you reproduce it or show me what you saw? And if it's all their psychic uncanny ability, I relay that to a supervisor. If they want to follow up on it, we'll assign somebody to follow up on it. But my belief is you can't be clairvoyant. These voodoo TV shows that tell people that it's possible, I just don't believe it. I've worked cases, I have a missing person case where the family went to a psychic. I'm like, okay.
Okay. I feel I have to apologize for the question. I just had to, I'm with you. I just said, I had to ask the question though. Okay. I'm nearly done, I promise. In your report, you mentioned Grosse Pointe Woods Police Department, correct? Excuse me, my voice is failing me. Right? You mentioned Grosse Pointe Woods a few times in your...
In my report.
Yes. But they don't appear anywhere in your conclusions, correct?
Not really, because I had mentioned before. See, in the end result of this, it was Grosse Pointe Farms that went over to Canada when they had already turned the case over to the Woods. So that I found to be unusual when they had relinquished their responsibility to another agency for them to run over to Canada. Didn't make sense.
You're a crime novelist, right?
Yeah, this is not a novel.
Well,
Yeah. Yes. We established that at the beginning.
if you were,
That's not fair, Chief.
if you were trying to come up with a conspiracy to cover up a murder, would this be something you'd write?
Objection
No.
form.
No, it's that this is, again, the available evidence and the lack of evidence and the loss and destruction of evidence that any police agency today in this state-of-the-art world we live in, highly trained, would not do this. This just doesn't make sense to me. And I taught crime scene, and I've taught and trained divers for years, and this just goes beyond common sense and protocol. It just does. No,
Am I correct?
it's not a novel.
Am I correct? You have, just to close this up here, you have no evidence of any conspiracy, correct?
I don't have
Objection
any
form.
evidence. What I have is a lack of evidence that supports a suicide. No more than we have evidence to support a murder at this point. It's been destroyed. It's gone. It's melted. It's gone. The scarf's given away. The car was given away with whatever else was left in it. Fiber evidence and DNA. It's gone. Fingerprints are gone. It's all gone.
But do you have any evidence that it was foul play?
No, we have a dead woman, and we have no answers based on the investigation done by 2 police departments. So it throws that conclusion out there. If it was an accident, you're not going to make it look like a suicide. It's an accident. If it's a suicide, you're going to prove it's a suicide, but you can't even do that in this case because of the lack of evidence collection, and it really boils down to the destruction of evidence, and that leaves me with just 2 thoughts. You're either incompetent or derelict.
Who destroyed evidence?
Hold on, he's in the middle of...
Oh, I thought he was done.
You're not done.
He gave you-
Are you done with your answer?
No, but
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
please
I
please
thought he
finish.
was. I thought the
Well, I thought
pause.
it was too, but I'm forward
All right, I'm just clearing up, so please finish.
what's that?
Continue.
Well, no, what I was going to say is, as I mentioned, the footwear wasn't documented properly and the snow's gone. So we can't even document that. We can't go back and determine if Joann Romain walked down that thing. We can't determine who sat there because no documentation, no photographs were taken that you could reproduce the actual size of the person's buttocks that sat there. If that was done to scale and blown up the scale, they could have measured Joann and said, she fits or she don't fit. It's like the Cinderella shoe. You know, if they had done the footwear impression photographs properly, a footwear impression expert could say, those shoes made those footprints. That was not done. So that evidence is destroyed. The scarf is gone. We don't know how it relates to this case. It's gone. Fiber evidence inside the Lexus, hair, whatever, it's gone. It wasn't collected, it's gone. The fingerprints weren't processed properly inside that car either. It's gone. So there's a lot of physical evidence that could have helped this case immensely. Protect the police department.
Any other physical evidence?
Excuse me, sir?
Anything else? Any
No,
other physical evidence?
Not that I could think of right
Okay,
now.
so the shoe print. Who processed the shoe print?
Who what?
Who processed the shoe print?
Who processes
Yeah,
those?
no, which
Well, that would have been
individual-
Grosse Pointe Farms was the initiating agency that took the photographs.
Sorry if it seems like I'm throwing you guys under the bus. But, and the I don't know, the butt print, for lack of a better term. Who?
Well, it's a body impression.
Okay, and who discovered
That would have been Grosse Pointe Farms again.
What about the scarf?
The what?
The scarf?
The scarf was the farms.
The Lexus? Who processed the Lexus?
The farms.
Fingerprints? Who processed
The
fingerprints?
farms.
Okay. So I'll go back to it again. What did the Woods do? You said they didn't follow up on certain witness leads. You believe. What else?
Other than that, no, nothing that I know of. They didn't go back to follow up on these other witnesses when they had the case. So I don't know why. I don't have it here, so I don't know why they didn't follow up on it, why they didn't try to ascertain
And-
any other thing.
And again, if there's records that show that they did talk to witnesses.
Great. I'd
then
love to see them, but I haven't seen them.
If you do see them, are you going to change your report, in your opinion?
I would have to
form.
read them and see what they say and see what they followed up on. But how can I answer, I'm going to change my report until I see something? That would be unfair to everybody. I'm not going to write a novel.
Yet.
No, I won't.
So
Not
again,
on this
all right.
case.
So hopefully this is my last question. So if I just understood your testimony just now, the sole event or thing that you are alleging that Grosse Pointe Woods did that was either incompetent or derelict or intentionally concealing was failing to follow up on witness information.
Objection form.
Yes, that's part of it. Where did the physical evidence go between the farms and the Woods switching over? at some point when the agency that now has taken the case would want to know, what did you guys do and where is this stuff at?
Wait, what but, okay,
We
let's
did
go
with
through
the
the physical,
scarf.
let's go through okay, so the scarf,
That disappeared before or after the Woods. I think it disappeared after the Woods took over.
it did. And what evidence do you have of that?
It was it was probably in the timeline when the scarf disappeared. But there was a request for the scarf, and it was gone. It was given away or donated was the answer I was given.
Given from whom? By whom? Who gave you that answer?
I think there was a request for evidence or something, and the scarf was no longer available. It was
No,
given
but who
away.
told you the scarf was no longer?
Michelle told me that.
Okay. And do you know who she talked to?
Somebody from the police department.
Which police department?
Farms, they would have had it.
Well, you just said the Woods. It disappeared
But the
from the
Woods
Woods.
should
Which
have
is it?
asked the farms, do you have evidence in this case? Where is it? Don't lose it. Don't give it away. Don't drop the ball.
So if it was already gone before it went to the Woods, you have no idea?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. So there's no reports that reflect any of this.
Okay.
Meth?
So you believe that the evidence against the Woods is that they should have followed up not just on witnesses, but also on evidence?
Chain of custody.
That's,
If there was a case that was going to be something to this case other than a suicide, if it was going to be a murder, there's no evidence. There's no evidence of a suicide, no evidence of a homicide, no evidence of nothing, because it's all gone.
okay.
So that's why I keep saying it. This is one of the most suspicious missing persons cases, but yet nobody documents anything as far as photography and physical evidence.
Okay,
It's just all gone.
I'm just trying to get a list of what it is that you're, so that I know, as it pertains to my clients, what you're concluding. And my understanding now is that your conclusions about the Woods is that their activity, their suspicious activity, if you'll call it that, is that they didn't follow up on evidence and that they didn't follow up on witnesses. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there anything else?
No.
Okay. Is that anywhere in your report that that's your part of your conclusion?
Did I say that in my report?
Yes.
That's what they didn't do or did do? I don't recall. I have to read it to see if I said, oh, they didn't do this and they didn't do this.
Please do.
That's what I'm saying right now.
Please take a look through and tell me where it says that in your report.
You want me to do what now?
Look in your report and tell me where it says that Grosse Pointe Woods failed to follow up on evidence and failed to follow up on witnesses.
What? Okay, well, there's one statement here I made in page 11. Under the first row of bullet points, it said that which we kind of been discussing, unorthodox methods of the investigation give rise to the question of their integrity and purpose, improper use of manpower, evidence not collected nor analyzed, failure to document the crime scene properly, ignoring statements of witnesses, and pursuing an unproven theory of suicide. There's more evidence pointing in the direction of a homicide than a suicide, yet GPFT and WPD has ignored or minimized those clues. Interestingly, when JMR's body is discovered, it's the detectives from Grosse Pointe Farms that respond and once again proffer their suicide theory to the Canadian authorities, even though they surrendered the case to Grosse Pointe Woods.
When did you add "and Grosse Pointe Woods PD" to that sentence?
It's right there.
No, when did you add it though?
When did I add it?
Yeah, was this part of your?
Wait, hold on. Objection, it goes to the drafting of the expert report. I'm not going to allow him to answer that. Please don't answer.
This was already disclosed. Toward the end.
So what was the improper use of manpower? There was no, Grosse Pointe Woods did not improperly use manpower, correct?
Objection form.
I take the whole case in its entirety, and I'm looking at from beginning to end, and there's some investigative things that the Woods has done that they just kind of glossed over. And as far, if you're not going to investigate this whole thing thoroughly by following up with the witnesses and at least writing some reports that say, look, I followed up on Hawk and I followed up on this part of the case and this is what we found and these are the witnesses that were brought into this case. There's nothing there. So it looks like they just
So if those
danced around it.
So if those reports exist, you don't have them?
It might. I don't have them.
Okay. You also state that there is witness testimony about a man dressed in black running along the roadway in a suspicious manner. What witness?
There was a witness listed in the, I think it was in the timeline. It talked about somebody saw from the school some person that was running along the sidewalk out near by the church at a time of night that was suspicious to them. I didn't see any police reports reflecting the interview with that person, or the person was wearing a scarf, so if the scarf was with that person, again, the scarf disappeared.
Okay, so the question is, so you said that there was, your report says there was testimony.
Oh, the timeline.
Is the timeline
It's in the
testimony?
timeline. No,
Is this sworn?
no, it's not.
But you're
sworn, it's
relying on it.
testimony. Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's a lie. You'd have to ask Michelle if it's a lie. She wrote it.
Okay, so
I read it.
as far as you know, she wrote it.
Yes.
Okay, because
far
you
as
have
I
no
know.
independent knowledge.
I didn't see her write it.
Okay, and did she tell you she wrote it?
Yes.
Okay, so your belief is she wrote it.
Yes.
Earlier, you said that the what you used this for was,
It's like
just-
a guideline.
but no, earlier what you said you used it for was just that 925 Grosse Pointe Woods officer
Right.
going to the, that's not
But
true, is
there
it?
was also that statement in there about the man running down the sidewalk, which I added in here about Hawk. You know, but I'm just saying that these things were brought up to the police, but there's no evidence to
Okay,
support what they did.
Other than this timeline, what evidence do you have, well, let me finish the question before you say no. What evidence do you have that there was a report by anyone to any police agency of a man dressed in black running along the roadway in a suspicious manner?
All I know is right there.
So
I
if
didn't
this,
see a
if this
police
is
report.
incorrect, then there wouldn't be a police report about
Right.
that, would there?
No, there wouldn't be
Okay.
if it's incorrect.
Thank you. And you don't believe, in your conclusions there, or in the bullet points there, you have the word found in parentheses, or excuse me, in quotations, where it says, before the police found the Lexus.
We on
There's-
12 still?
No, I'm on top of 11. It looks like the fifth bullet point. There is testimony of a white-colored SUV parked suspiciously in a dark area near the church before police.
Okay, that again came from that timeline.
Okay, so we've got another statement now from the timeline that goes into your report.
It was just bullet points off of that.
Well,
Those are
this
the
is-
couple things I used.
But
Yes,
these are things that you are
That was
relying
the
on.
same person, though. If I'm not mistaken, it was the same person.
Who?
That whoever the person was that Michelle mentions in there that saw the man running down the sidewalk, that there was also this white SUV. Should be in the timeline.
Where?
Tell me where.
I don't have to see the timeline again. Do I have it, or do you?
It's number 18. Yeah, right, man.
Okay, here's the one about, on first page, 1950. Michelle Alt leaves the school directly north of St. Paul's, right next door. It observes a white Mercedes SUV parked near St. Paul's Church. The school is situated directly north of St. Paul's, right next door. Upon leaving the parking lot, she witnessed a man who seemed very out of place, wearing a lightweight coat and scarf, running strangely along the lake side of Lake Shore.
Who's Michelle Alt?
I don't know. Not Michelle Romain, it says
Yeah.
Michelle Alt.
I know.
So she put it on the timeline. She handed it to me as part of the documentation. I'm assuming that the police would also get this list of names because she's asking them for help. I didn't come here to investigate
Do you have
Anything other than the crime scene evidence and the dive operation.
Do you have any idea if any police agency spoke to Michelle Alt?
Michelle?
Michelle
I have
Alt.
no idea. There's no report that reflects it. So I don't know if they spoke with her. So I don't see a report, so I'm going, they must not have.
Well,
This is all happening within the couple of days.
so it sounds to me like you relied pretty heavily on this.
I didn't rely that heavily on it. I relied mostly on these photographs.
Wait a minute, though.
And the police report. I relied on some of this when I saw omissions in the police work. I had to get something from somewhere.
Let me ask the question then.
Yeah.
You conclude that there are omissions in the work the police did because there are things on this timeline that you're unable to corroborate with the police reports, correct?
They're not in here, so they don't exist. Unless they existed after that timeline was created, which doesn't make sense.
That's assuming that this timeline is accurate.
I'm
correct?
also assuming that my client is not going to lie to me and lie to the police when she's trying to find out what happened to her mother.
But you don't know whether or not this is accurate, this timeline.
No, I can't say that every bit of it's 100%
So when
accurate.
there's representations in here about things that happened, and you're using that as a basis to say that there's an omission from what the police did, shouldn't you do some independent corroboration of this unsubstantiated timeline?
The police should have corroborated this, not me.
But
I didn't write this.
How do you know the police had this?
Well, I don't see a police report that says it. There's not one in here.
If they don't have this information, why would there be a police report on it?
Well, then it would go right back to Michelle not talking to the police and telling them she needs help to find her mother or what happened to her mother. That makes no sense. She's asked the police to help her for 5-6 years.
But you've already testified. You didn't review any of the testimony of any of the officers to consider whether or not they conflict with this timeline in any way. Have you?
All these reports conflict with everything they did and said. So me reading the depositions.
I asked you a yes or no question.
No, it's an how can I?
How can you
Their
review the
depositions are
testimony?
not going to help me.
So your opinion is less information is better in determining what happened in this case?
Objection form.
No, my testimony is that when you respond to a crime scene, you do it right the first time. You investigate it right the first time. You don't play catch up when you're caught with your pants down later.
And you're basing that on this timeline that was given to you by your client?
I'm
Objection
saying
form.
that there's things on here that should have been followed up on.
When
Yes.
you say here, you're referring to Exhibit 18, the timeline?
Yes,
so the
I'm
record's
referring
clear.
to that, yeah.
Okay. And you have no idea whether they were or were not? You just say...
There's no police reports.
You were given no police reports?
No,
Okay.
not showing that they
form.
did that.
Sorry.
Not showing that they followed up with all of these different witnesses.
Okay, one of your conclusions is that there were deliberate illegal acts of a few officers. Which few officers deliberately...
No, I'm not accusing any particular officers. There is obviously, again, like I said before, it's either incompetence or dereliction of duty. Who am I going to blame for that? Whoever took these photographs was either incompetent or derelict in their duty. They did not process this crime scene properly at all.
You have the police reports, right?
I have police reports.
Don't you know by now who authored the police report?
Yeah, I don't know right now by name right this second.
Well,
but
wouldn't that be something if you're going to accuse the nebulous, undefined few officers, wouldn't it be important to put a name to those few officers?
Well, it would be important. I can't say that this officer did it purposely or did it accidentally.
You
I
can't say
don't
that any
know.
officer did anything purposely or accidentally.
I don't know what they did purposely. All I know is that there's a correct way to do this, and this is not it.
And you don't know, but my question is, you can't say whether any particular officer did anything deliberate or derelict, to use your word. Can you?
I can say that whoever was in charge of this crime scene and processed this crime scene is either inept or derelict.
Don't you have the police reports?
Okay, let me find out
I
who
mean,
took
why
the
wouldn't you say
photographs
that?
and
Why
we'll
wouldn't you say
name
that
them.
in your report?
And that would be the farms, because they're the ones that processed this scene. Nope,
That's
stays here.
Oh, that's public
That one don't have one on it. Okay, where did all the farms reports go? The vanishing reports again. Where did the farm reports go?
Are they under the photographs?
No, I think that's the PowerPoint. I don't see them here. That's unusual. All the farms reports are gone.
Okay, maybe I can make this a little, I realize there's a question on the table, Keith, there's no objection, maybe I can shorten that.
Yeah.
Is it fair then to say that your conclusion with regard to which individuals would be those investigating the scene on the day of the incident on January 12, 2010?
Yes, and whoever processed the car, which I think was after the 12th.
Do you know which agency process, which?
I believe it was the farm.
Okay, all right. Your opinion also says that your opinions are scientific. Do you have any science?
Objection
any opinion
form.
degrees?
Is there anyone?
Are your opinions scientific or are they professional?
Everything that I was taught as a crime scene investigator was taught by doctors in that profession as a technician. And everything that I taught was reflected by what they taught me. And all of that was done, and these experts all work across, oh, thank you, sir.
You had them commingled with Exhibit 8.
You got commingled?
They were commingled.
I'm just trying to figure out what area.
So it would be scientific in the sense that the science of crime scene investigation is established by people that are scientists in that field, and they teach them to laypersons like myself. And then we do the procedures that they teach us. And there's a scientific basis behind what they've taught. If we do it correctly, it can be reproduced. So that would be a science. Now, I'm not claiming I'm a scientist, because I'm not.
Well, I'm just, your introduction says the scientific opinions set forth in this report.
Based on Dr. Henry Lee's, I
No,
was one of his students, he's a scientist.
I'm just trying to square
and
with the
others.
end of the report that says professional opinions. It says scientific at the beginning, at the end it says professional. I'm just trying to square the
Yeah.
two. Which is
Well, it's based scientifically, and I'm a professional in the field. But the
So
results
are there
can be
any so, I mean, there's no learned treatises that you used?
There's no
or
what?
Learned treatises? There's no manuals that you used?
There
to
are.
use?
There's
Did you use
tons
it?
of literature out there. I used this literature for years. I've taught from the literature. I've
No,
used it.
Okay.
I haven't written it.
Let me finish the question.
Okay.
In formulating your opinions,
Yes.
did you rely on any particular manuals?
Well, I didn't cite them here, but the FBI manuals on crime scene investigation explain footwear impression collection.
Did you consult that in formulating your opinion in this case?
Yes, I have consulted that, but I've used that for years. I've done it for
No,
years.
but what I'm trying to figure out is your opinion based on your body of knowledge and experience that you've acquired in 25 years of law enforcement, or is it based on...
Yes, that's where it came from.
Thank you. So it's not, okay, all right. So there's no standardized methodology or peer-reviewed
No, yes, there is. That's what I was trying to tell you
So
before.
I got to
I don't write the peer reviews, but the forensic journals and all of those applications that you're discussing and all the different associations are written by scientists in the field.
Sir.
They send that information down.
I understand. I think you're missing the point of the question respectfully.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, when you drafted this report, when you prepared your report and did your work, did you consult a manual and say, okay, page 57 says this is how you're supposed to process a footprint in the snow? And I know that, and I'm going to look at this now, and I'm going to cite from it and refer to it. Or conversely, did you just say, I've done this long enough, I know how it is, yeah, I had that training? Which
Yes,
one?
that's what it was, the latter.
So you didn't actually refer to any manual?
No,
That's all I
no.
needed to know.
I thought I answered that first
Okay.
time.
Just want to make sure. And I think we touched on this. You don't know where Joann Matouk entered the water.
No.
So your conclusion that she never entered the lake anywhere near the church, you
I'm
believe she
bas-
probably didn't, but you don't know.
Basing it on an elimination factors of the difficulty for her to traverse that. If I had a hard time in the summer, a 4'9", 170 some odd pound woman in high heels, I can't believe she made it down there without falling on her
But that's
face.
just based on your
It's based
walking
on
down
my experience and based on me actually physically going there
Okay.
and going in there. It was difficult to do.
but not impossible.
Not for me. I don't know about Joann Romain, but from her
Right. You
physical
don't know
condition.
whether you don't know whether she could have been down there.
I asked Michelle if her mother was a gymnast, and she said no.
So similarly, opinion number 9, that JMR was rendered unconscious, then placed in the water at or near where her body was recovered. How do you know she was rendered unconscious?
I said that's a possibility based on the fact that her lungs were not full of water like a typical drowning, where someone is immersed and drowns and their lungs fill up across the board with water.
And are you a pathologist?
No, but I've investigated enough drownings and sat with enough pathologists during these drownings and have been explained that situation a number of times, and conversely dry drownings and secondary drownings. And as a dive professional and as a rescue diver and an instructor, we know that.
So
now, it's just, again, an opinion based on my experience. I'm not a
Okay.
pathologist.
So it's based on your non-medical, your lay opinion.
Yes.
Objection form.
It's okay, I already answered. All right, I think I will almost pass it.
No, he's not.
Want a link?
Do you have your
Psych.
Do you have your copy of this, George? I don't know if I have it's an older one. Can you flip to your PowerPoint presentation is different than mine, but I believe it's the second, it should be the second to last.
Here's the one they just printed in colors right there.
Oh, okay.
And I have one too.
We talked about this earlier, but bullet point 3 on page 53 of your PowerPoint.
53?
Is that inconsistent police? What's the,
Okay, which bullet point?
Inconsistent police reporting, bullet points 3 and 4. So you believe that somebody went to Michelle Matouk's, spoke to Michelle Matouk before, I'm sorry, Michelle Romain, sorry. We'll just call her Michelle. You believe somebody spoke to Michelle before lien was run, correct?
We had discussed that in the earlier part of the
And you
deposition.
base that only on the timeline?
I had based it, the timeline had her time, and then the time that I saw
The lien check?
the lien was a different time. And then you had said, or George had said, produced, there was others too, so that they
So
were all
if-
after. I only saw the one.
If there's testimony in this case that an officer actually went to
Well,
the,
I would have.
hold on,
go ahead.
let him finish
if
his
there's
question.
testimony in this case that an officer actually went to the home an hour later than contained in the Exhibit 18, Would that change your opinion about these inconsistencies?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but yeah, because there's no reports that say when they went to the house. There isn't one that says that specifically.
In your opinion, what would be conclusive evidence that somebody was in the water? Sufficient to utilizing the assets that were, like the Coast Guard?
Well,
Objection form.
had I, like I said before, if I had responded there and you have the footprints, and somebody's missing, and you find out who owns the car, you call the family, they don't know where she is, you bring a dog out, dog leads you to the water's edge, I would be pretty convinced that somebody went on the water, especially if you have the footprints going there and no footprints leaving. But being I have no photos showing me someone left.
No, I'm not, I know you don't.
Please
Well, I'm asking him about.
Okay, that's how I would be convinced that somebody went in the water. At least I would be more convinced
Sure.
had the dog led me to the shoreline and the footprints were documented in such a way that it showed that those footprints were made by Joann's shoes when her body was finally recovered.
Okay, so let's say for the sake of argument,
Yes.
you don't know whose vehicle this is, you've got footprints and the dog doesn't find anything. What then?
What else? I mean, typically a missing person, unless the family could say, oh, my mother or sister's suicidal, or we know something happened to her, the police aren't going to initiate anything for 24 hours. That's the normal case.
So-
People turn up missing. We had a guy in Florida that was gone for frickin' 4 weeks. Everybody had searching for this guy. He decided to go run off on his own.
Sure, that happens.
And that could have been the same case here. So,
But then again, it might not have, right?
but again, it didn't happen in this case. She's dead. But we still don't have conclusive evidence that says she went in that water, that she made the footprints, that she sat on the break wall. It's just not there.
How often, in your experience, have you encountered a case where have you ever encountered a case where you find a car suspiciously parked, and we'll use sand because you're in Florida, footprints in the sand leading down to the water?
Happens a lot.
Okay. Usually, in Florida, it's pretty common to have footprints going to the sand, into the water, correct?
Yeah.
Do you know how common it is in Michigan in January to have footprints leading down to the water's edge?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people walk down to the water's edge just to look at the water.
So you have no idea
No.
if this is a suspicious occurrence or not?
No.
So in
Why
your
would it be
professional,
suspicious?
you cannot offer a professional opinion as to whether or not the crime scene, or excuse me, the scene, I hate to use crime scene, the scene as depicted in the reports should have been considered suspicious.
Objection form.
It doesn't appear suspicious at the first viewing of it. It just doesn't. A car sitting in a church parking lot without any kind of initial investigation other than immediately call out assets to go in the water.
Did they immediately call out assets?
It seems like it based on the timeline. They were there for maybe 20 or 30 minutes, and it doesn't say in the report that the officers did a search of the shoreline, that they looked in the water with their flashlights, or that they called the family, that they did anything. That by the time the family got there, the helicopter was already there.
Yeah, but you don't know how long it was between when the officers discovered the car and when the family arrived, other than the timeline, correct?
No, the report said that they found the car at, I think it was 21:30.
Okay.
And then by the time the Romain family got to the church, it was only 40 minutes or something in the helicopters, and everybody's there.
How do you know it was only 40 minutes?
How do I know it was only, well, if they only found the car at 21:30 and the helicopters are there at just before 10 o'clock.
What are you basing your...
Well, there was reports that had the time of arrival of the stuff there.
Okay, but you said the Romain family arrived 40
Well, they
minutes.
said they did, but there's
Okay,
reports
that's what
that
I'm saying.
reflect
They-
when the assets
But there's no
showed up.
report that says when the Romain family arrived.
No, but the assets
Okay, so
do.
you're relying for that part on just the statements of Michelle Romain?
No, because there's a report of when they arrived on the scene.
But again, you have no experience with recoveries in snow. You've worked in Florida, South Florida, your entire career, correct?
Yes.
And you've had no experience investigating any sort of crime in snow? or any sort of incident in the snow.
I hunt in the snow. I had a
Okay,
track in the
but you
snow.
don't, okay,
It's the
great.
same difference.
It's the same it's the same thing. So wait a minute, you're equating hunting for sport
Talking
with
about
investigating a
footprints.
scene of somebody
Footprints
possibly in the
in the
water.
snow.
I'm asking the question. You're equating that with following footprints into the water?
Water is water. And I said before, as a professional dive instructor...
I'm not talking about the water.
Hold on.
We are talking about
let
the
him
water
finish.
because you're talking about footprints. Is there any difference between footprints in the sand and footprints in the snow? No. Snow melts, sand blows away, rain washes the footprint
Sure.
away. You got to get it when you get it. You can't wait. You got to get it now.
I appreciate that statement. There was no question about
So
that.
there's really no...
What I'm asking you,
It's no more special is what I'm getting at. We wore dry suits just like these guys did to
I'm not.
to
There's
walk
no
in the
question pending right now. I'm going to ask you to not just go off on whatever you feel
Mm-hmm.
like saying. Okay, this is my time to ask you questions. And the longer you keep speaking, the longer we're going to be here when there's no question on the table. The question was simply about whether you have ever done any investigation in the snow.
No.
Okay, so you don't know, you can't opine on whether or not what the officers reported as finding was considered suspicious enough to deploy the assets or request the assets that were used in this case, can you?
Objection form.
I don't think it was suspicious at all. I've said that over and over again.
But you have no experience with this type of a scene, do you?
I've got plenty of experience with footprints going to a water's edge. We have
Yes.
remote areas where footprints go to a water's edge. It doesn't mean that someone jumped in the water and drowned.
Right, but it doesn't mean they didn't, does it?
No, it doesn't. So do the investigation correctly the first time. Bring the dog out to determine if this person who is in this car walked to the water's edge. Their report says there was footprints leading from the car.
If that dog, let's just
Where's there
speculate.
snow?
If it would have taken, I don't know, do you know how long it would have taken to get a dog out there?
They say they have Grosse Pointe Farms has a dog. It took us a couple minutes to have a dog show up. I don't know.
Who said
you don't have a dog?
Who told you Grosse Pointe Farms had a dog?
Somebody told them again that.
Somebody told
again,
who?
Told me, Michelle, that they said they couldn't get a dog there because it was too cold. I never heard of such a thing.
Okay. So again, you're getting that information from Michelle Romain.
Right.
Okay. You did nothing to corroborate that at all.
I don't have to corroborate the fact that there's no footprints leading from this
That's
car.
not the question.
Well,
That's not
you
the
asked me
question.
what I would have done, and I have no experience in a missing person, snow or sand. It doesn't matter. No footprints go from this car to the snow. There's no proof of it, none. But that's what it says in the report, in the police report.
So that's what you're hanging your hat on.
Pretty much, because how do you know those footprints didn't come from somebody walking down the road that decided to take a look at the water and sit down for a minute? And we don't know. They say no footprints left. No footprints. No
With all due
pictures.
respect, you're being a little inconsistent because you've earlier testified how difficult it is to get down to the water's edge. How difficult, even for you in the summertime. So now you're thinking they should take a cavalier position on what they reported as a sole set of footprints going down to the water's edge and just do some investigation for, I don't know, half an hour while somebody might be in the water, and you've already testified that they could only survive for about a half an hour?
Objection form.
You missed everything I said before about the temperature of the car. All these things take just a couple seconds.
Hold on.
Your own documents.
Hold on, wait a second. Everybody's getting a little up. I know it's late in the day. Let him finish answering his
Sure.
question and then ask your next question. Come
Sure.
on.
Go ahead.
I'm just repeating myself.
Sure.
He showed up,
So he should have
the
checked.
car in the parking lot.
Isn't it
I
true
went to
that
the parking lot at night. You asked me to answer the question.
Sure.
If you want me to answer it or not, I don't know.
oftentimes people go to church in the evening and then meet a friend for dinner?
And go to church and go to dinner.
Yeah,
There's a
right.
lot of reasons
So
why.
the car might have been cold, right? It wouldn't have mattered, really, would it?
Well, right, then, so why would you assume that they walked to the water's edge and jumped in the water? No, nothing was done to prove otherwise. Nothing. Nothing.
As far as you know. As far as you know, nobody went to Michelle's house to see.
Excuse me, sir?
Nobody went to Michelle's house to see who had the car that evening?
Yeah, they went at some point, according to Michelle, but there's no report that says that they went. She said they went, so now we're believing her timeline and not the report.
Okay. And you did
So,
nothing you didn't ask for or weren't provided any deposition testimony or affidavits to actually correct the timeline?
Objection form.
I relied on what was done that night. If they changed their reports and their testimony after the fact, I don't know what to say.
So you're now accusing the officers of perjuring themselves?
I didn't say that. I said, I can't go, if I'm going to read the whole case file and your depositions, I wouldn't be able to make a conclusion on this case for who knows how long. I have to work with what I was given.
Okay.
Photographs. The crime scene
That's right.
photographs reflect that the job was not done properly.
Okay.
That's what it reflects.
Okay. And you weren't provided that additional information, correct?
And that doesn't change that this was not done right.
It was a yes or no
So
question.
no, it wasn't provided to me,
Thank
but it
you.
doesn't change my opinion.
It doesn't change your opinion?
No, how would it, this was not done correctly, so how does it change my
By
opinion of
this
the
you mean the
crime
crime scene photos? Or the
Excuse
crime
me?
scene. I keep saying crime scene, I'm sorry. The scene, the photos of St. Paul's Church and the water's edge.
scene? Right,
Okay.
wasn't
you.
done correctly.
That's what the whole thing is based, that's what your whole opinion is based on?
For the
Correct.
most part, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass.
All right, let's take a break for, I probably need about 15 minutes.
You need that long?
I do.
Okay.
The time is 4:34.